This is your president and at his best, if you will. Watch.
My message to unvaccinated Americans is this. What more is there to wait for? What more do you need to see? We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin.
Do you want to be on the side of Dr. King or George Wallace? Do you want to be on the side of John Lewis or Bull Connor? Do you want to be on the side of Abraham Lincoln or Jefferson Davis? This is the moment to decide, to defend our elections, to defend our democracy.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about this pretty awesome clip featuring Charles Payne of Fox Business, as he's going to go off on Miss Jessica Tarlov, who's basically the liberal on Fox News, and the fact that she is boohoo, whining, and complaining about Trump's rhetoric, okay? And Charles Payne is going to bring up the fact that, hey, you're complaining about Trump's rhetoric, but what about Biden's rhetoric? And all of the things that him and the mainstream liberal media say about Trump supporters. I mean, this guy Biden, according to Charles Payne, hates half of the country, which I tend to agree with, because Biden does have a tendency to, say things about voters in this country, like, for example, that we are domestic terrorists simply because we disagree with Democrats and far leftists politically. And you also have outlets like MSNBC that use this type of rhetoric on a daily basis as well.
Well, I think two things are going on. One, this speaks to how badly the mainstream media has covered him. They have normalized him. They have cleaned up the rhetoric so he sounds in a clip or he reads in print much more coherent than he actually is. It's only very recently that the mainstream media has been reporting on his really shocking totalitarian claims. But of course, he's been this way all along. And I think because they have done such a bad job, because they have made an effort to treat the Republican Party like the Democratic Party, this notion that he's not so bad, that he's just kind of a cartoon character, has set in. And that's on the mainstream media. That's on the failure to be honest and to side with truth rather than having this false balance. And I think the second thing, and why it's perhaps important to go to one of these rallies, is to understand why he does have supporters. These people are part of a fascist cult. And let's be honest, there are a lot of them, but a lot of them doesn't mean that they're behaving logically or rationally. To the contrary, we've seen in other fascist regimes that millions of people, sometimes even a majority of the country, becomes intoxicated with an authoritarian figure. And these people are utterly irrational. If you speak to some of them, they will spit back these bizarro conspiracy theories. They actually believe in all of the mumbo jumbo that he tells them. So I think it would be a wake-up call about what these people are about. And no, we're not going to convince people who are part of the cult to switch. As you say, they're impervious to any kind of data, any kind of information. But what you have to do if you care about democracy is mobilize the people who already know what he's a danger and reaffirm and re-educate the people who are perhaps kind of flirting in the middle. They're soft Republicans, they're never Republicans, about the danger of going back to Trump. And I think that's the job between now and November, and that's the challenge for the Biden administration.
Yeah, so you see, now you heard that, okay? This is the type of rhetoric that is spewed on a daily basis on MSNBC and by people like Joe Biden and the Biden administration. If you're not on the side of Joe Biden, then you're on the side of, I don't know, Jim Crow, right? You're on the side of the Confederacy, okay? You are a white supremacist. You're Nazi adjacent, right? This woman basically said that you're in a fascist cult. You're irrational. You can't be reasoned with. Again, this is the type of stuff they say all the time about basically half of the country. But yet all we hear about is Trump's rhetoric and never about Biden's rhetoric and the things that he's saying. And Charles Payne has had enough, okay? He's going to basically go off on Miss Jessica Tarlov here for boohoo whining and crying about Trump, but conveniently forgetting about Biden. So let's get into it.
That are voting for Nikki Haley, that some of them have voted for Ron DeSantis, who maybe is more in his lane. But the Nikki Haley voter, are they going to try to get them, do you think?
Well, I'm certainly not an advisor to the Trump campaign, but
But it is, we talk in the millions of votes when we're talking about the general election, but it actually comes down to the tens of thousands, right? The margins in Georgia, in Arizona, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, it's minute. Right. It can be the difference between whether you came out and you criticized your opponent's dress, which some could interpret as demeaning a woman, again, which is obviously something that he suffers from, or just making a little offhanded comment that someone says, you know what, I'm going to sit home, or actually, I want 4 more years of Joe Biden. So yes, it would be smart, as it always was when he was president, if he would listen to Kayleigh about this. But he has an uncontrollable narcissism and rage about him when he feels insulted. And it's appealing to the base to say, we love it. He's a counterpuncher. But you've now lost a general election. You've presided over the loss of the Republican Senate, the Republican House. The abortion has been on the ballot 7 times. Democrats have swept it in all of that. And he has not moderated at all. And frankly, I don't think it's in him for him to be able to do it for more than 20 minutes.
Charles, you talked about the issues here and how immigration here is at the top, but it also is an economic issue, and it crosses all boundaries. And it is a weakness for President Biden and the Democrats. Dean Phillips talks about this on the trail, and he talks about how Democrats demean MAGA voters. He talked about it with me today, saying that, it's just strange that they're talking about a group of voters like that.
Yeah, and I don't think it's narcissism. I think if you've lived in New York long enough, it's maybe a New York thing. Someone punches you, you punch him back harder. That's why I grew up in Harlem.
Not if the country's at stake, right?
He became president of the United States with that same personality. I don't think that, listen, I think it's worse with Biden calling MAGA. Biden's anger and vitriol and hatred for MAGA is far more worse than President Trump's individual battles with someone who crosses him. That is something that is really detrimental to this country, that the president of the United States despises half of the United States. President Biden, I said earlier today, about a week ago, I had a segment coming up, so I Googled Biden hates MAGA. Nothing but articles after articles after articles. He has expressed hatred for half of the country.
Who's writing those articles?
Yeah, I mean... If you look this up, like I actually Googled this, if you actually Google Biden and MAGA, there's going to be article after article about Biden and the things that he says about extreme MAGA Republicans and what Democrats need to do about extreme MAGA Republicans, as if, regular, normal, everyday people who want low inflation, closed borders, they want to have less crime, they don't want to keep sending money overseas. Yeah, these people are some type of threat to the country, right? Extreme MAGA Republicans. Charles Payne is 100% correct on this.
It doesn't matter. Look
it's
at him.
not.
Because the bottom line is he says it. He has vitriol for them. And so does MSNBC, and so does CNN, and so does the New York Times. They have vitriol for half of the nation. They don't look at them like fellow Americans. And it's unfortunate. They try to paint them as racist. That all the things that they do to their fellow Americans who simply want a safe home, a safe community, for their children to have prosperity. They want the same thing, but they demean them all the time. That's why I think Phillips was so intriguing, because he went to a rally to find out for himself. And guess what? Golly, these are some pretty cool people. They're just like us.
Exactly what
She has nothing to say, right? She's speechless. She can't even respond. But yeah, I mean, Dean Phillips went to a Trump rally and he was like, yeah, my party, Democrats, are delusional.
And the fact is we have a duopoly, a two-party system that is literally working against voters. And voters who don't want to show up and vote in primaries and then get frustrated by the choices we have in November, that's part of the problem. We have a crisis of participation. And I got to tell you guys, I went to a Donald Trump rally a couple nights ago. Never been to one. I had an event across the street. I saw the line of people waiting in the cold for hours. And I thought, what the heck? I'm going to be a leader who actually invites people, doesn't condemn them. Met probably 50 Trump people waiting in line. Every single one of them, thoughtful, hospitable, friendly, all of them so frustrated that they feel nobody's listening to them but Donald Trump. A diverse crowd, people who had never been to a Trump event before. My party is completely delusional right now. And somebody had to wake us up. And if that's my job, so be it.
you would rather, though, have Biden in the White House.
Wait, so a Democrat went to a Trump rally and he didn't come away thinking that these people are white supremacists, fascists that want to overthrow the government, right? Domestic terrorists. No, he actually came away thinking, oh, wait, these guys are normal. They just want somebody to listen to them and to understand their problems and what they're going through, and they just want what's best for the country. Oh, who would have thought, right? Who would have thought, okay, that MAGA Republicans or Trump supporters are just normal, everyday people. But again, if you listen to the mainstream liberal media, the Biden administration, that's just simply not the case. These people are domestic terrorists, white supremacists, right? They're, insurrectionists, etc., right? This is what they say.
Jamie Dimon said this week as well. And it's smart to understand. And also you see the shift that's happening, right? You look at black voters, Hispanic voters, college women, Latinos who have moved towards Trump.
Yes.
So it's no longer that people are in these boxes based on what their gender is or what they look like. They appear to want, a safe country, and they appear to want a good economy, regardless of what label they have.
That's completely fine. And I know that the lines have shifted dramatically, but Joe Biden's responsible for a lot of that. You say that he's demeaned half the country. First of all, it's 74 million people that voted for Donald Trump. And he is explicit every time he talks about the MAGA movement to say that this is a subsection of the Republican Party, which is borne out in elections when you see people voting against Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's not, no. Come on now. It's not a subsection of the Republican Party. MAGA is like 80 to 70%, right? 70-80% of the Republican Party is MAGA, right? So when you talk about, MAGA, you're talking about a vast majority of the Republican Party. You're talking about a vast majority of your political opponents. That is who he's talking about, okay? When he says stuff like that. I mean, come on.
And this idea that
but what about the people voting for him? What about the people voting for him? He gives teleprompter speeches. I mean, you have to understand that it's...
but he is talking about insurrectionists. Yes, he is. No. Why is he talking about January 6th? And he says
MAGA like it's a swear word, instead of a slogan.
If you get called regularly, and which Democrats do, thugs, he's the commander-in-chief, pedophiles.
Why can't he call the border a crisis while he's denigrating and castigating Americans?
Hey, who knows? I mean, Trump may use some of these terms, but I feel like when Trump uses these terms, it's probably a little bit more accurate, right? When you're calling, Democrats that, want to, push a certain agenda on children, when you use certain terms for these people, I feel like that's a lot more accurate than calling, people who agree with Trump or that support Trump insurrectionist, okay, or domestic terrorist, or fascist, or Nazis, right? I think there's a difference here, okay? There's not an equivalency. Just because Trump uses mean words doesn't mean that's the equivalent of Biden using mean words, because, hey, in, a lot of cases when, people on the left are described a certain way because of certain behaviors they exhibit, then, yeah, I mean, it's pretty accurate, right? But to say that Trump supporters, people who, have never done anything before violent, and to describe them as domestic terrorists, I think it's silly, especially considering how you never hear the word domestic terrorist be used to describe BLM, the Roe v. Wade rioters, the pro-Palestine rioters, Antifa. All of these are far left individuals, okay? And I've never heard the word or the term domestic terrorist or domestic extremist, or extreme, really, be used to describe these people. But I have used this word or this term be used to describe people on the right, even though they have not committed these types of acts of violence at a mass scale all across the country, like we've seen with all these other groups that I've named.
No, the voters are talking about that, Jessica.
But excuse me, about demeaning voters.
The President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, went to Philadelphia a year and a half ago with a Marine posted behind him.
I saw.
And gave a decidedly political speech where he insulted a large part of the country. And I've said many times on this network, and I'll say it again tonight, if people, a lot of people, spend a fraction of the time that they spend obsessing over Donald Trump, the person, learning one thing about the Trump voter, things may be very different. This is Joe Biden's version of Hillary's deplorable and irredeemable.
And here's one thing. We're going to be talking about this for many months. So we have to move on.
I'm excited.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I don't blame Charles Payne, right? I mean, when you listen to people talk about Trump's rhetoric, Trump says mean things, and a lot of times when Trump is talking, he's talking about just one specific individual. Like, he's talking about Nikki Haley, okay? He ain't really trying to smear half the country, right? He's talking about Nikki Haley. He's talking about the Democrat Party. No, but when Democrats talk, when you hear MSNBC, CNN, when they talk, no, they're not just talking about Trump. They're talking about people that support Trump, right? They're actually really talking about voters, right? People, okay? The people that vote for Trump, okay? The people that vote for Trump are just as bad as Trump, according to the mainstream liberal media. And they say this all the time, okay? So, I don't know, man. Shout out to Charles Payne for, going off and saying what he got to say, because he's right. The rhetoric from the Biden administration is definitely not unifying in any way. It is actually extremely divisive. And this is something that's worth pointing out, because the Democrats, their whole thing is that, well, Trump is so divisive, right? And we're unifying. Except it seems like they're not really trying to unify anybody at all. They just demonize and smear anybody who disagrees with them politically. And that's basically a vast majority of the rhetoric coming from the left. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.